guys, Maddie and Brenna here.
First official episode.
Yay! Today we're gonna talk about our testimonies and backstories. But first, we kind of want to talk about like the dream behind our podcast. So it was probably about 6 months ago now. I had this dream one random night of I started a podcast with Brenna, talking about the Lord. I woke up that morning and I was like, "Ha! Like that's funny, God. Good one. Good joke. Nice one." Because in my mind, I was like, there is no way. Like, that is so out of my comfort zone. You're not going to catch me starting a podcast. Like, what the heck? No, thank you. But then I was also like, okay, like, sometimes God, like, uses dreams to speak to us. So, like, I'm going to pray over it for a little bit just to make sure. And I prayed over it for, like, a little bit. And then I just kind of forgot about it because I was just thinking that there's no way I'm going to do that. And then I was scrolling on Instagram one day and I saw this reel that was like, "This is your sign to start a podcast with your best friend." And I was like, no, it's not. Actually, no, it's not. But I texted Brenna and I was like, "So, like, what would you think about like starting a podcast?" And she was like, "That'd be so fun," and like was so on board with the idea. And I was like, what do you mean that wouldn't be fun? Stop. And then, like about a couple days later, she sent me the same exact reel that I saw that said, "This is your sign to start a podcast with your best friend." And I was like, oh.
And I did not know about this.
She didn't know about that.
She just surprised me with this.
I did just surprise you with that today. But so here we are.
Yeah.
Starting a podcast. Take what God says seriously, I guess, because here we are.
I guess. He ain't playing games.
He ain't playing games. Yeah. And kind of like with this podcast, like our purpose was like to like kind of like highlight how to walk through a Christian life as two teenagers in high school who have struggled with like anxiety and depression and like all the temptations and trials that come with being a high schooler.
And I mean, we do hope you guys like this because this is, I mean, not just for us. Like, we are doing this for us to grow closer to God, but also for you guys too, to have people to, like, for you to come to if you need to talk to us, because we are always there. Like, we will be, and we're not gonna shun you.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like we said, like we're always there. But we might not always post episodes. Like, we're not gonna have a recording schedule because like we can't pour from an empty cup. And so if we've been really struggling with like getting in the word, and just like pursuing God daily, like it's gonna be very hard for us obviously to like talk about how to follow the Lord if we're really struggling with that ourselves. So yeah, we're not gonna like promise an episode every 2 weeks or a month, or yeah. It's just when they come out, they come out. So yeah. We don't want to burn ourselves out on it by like forcing ourselves to do one every week. So we want to be like very, very honest on the podcast and share some like stories from what's happening in our lives. And with that, we want this to be like a safe space for us and for you. So like if we talk about something personal, and like obviously we're aware that we're posting on social media and people are gonna know about it. But we want respect from you guys to not like be like, "Oh, they did that. That's so terrible of them," and like go make fun of us and spread rumors. Like, don't do that. And we're also like, we want you guys to please, please, please talk to us and DM us and like talk to us about your personal struggles, and we can help walk you through stuff. And like if you have questions of stuff we talk about in the podcast, like feel free to ask for like an explanation or like whatever. Just please talk to us. And we're not going to be like, "Oh, look what they DM'd us. You, like, why would they do that?" Like, we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're not going to tell anyone. It's a safe space, so.
We will always be welcoming, but I also don't check my phone at all. So if you text me, either text Maddie or both of us, because
I check my phone. I check my messages, so it's true. I'll text her and I have to wait like 10 business days for a response.
Yeah.
Yeah. But today we're going to talk about our testimonies, because we feel like it's important, before we get into like deeper episodes of the podcast, to like share with you like who we are and how we got here and like our walk with God throughout our lives.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell like Maddie is too, but I'm going to share like what has brought me to be sitting here today talking about this, because I do not, like, this is not me gossiping. This is just purely me telling you what has brought me here today and what has brought me closer to the Lord.
Yeah. And in my testimony too, like, there are some sensitive things that I'll talk about. And gonna be completely transparent, like my voice might get shaky, my eyes, like I might tear up. And it might be sensitive for you, and if so, like, it's okay if you stop watching. Like, we're not gonna be offended by like
Yeah.
like, we won't even know that you stopped watching, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, if it's uncomfortable for you to watch, then feel free to stop watching. We're not forcing you to watch it. But we also want to be like, if you guys relate to it, like, we want to be able to help you through that. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so first we're gonna talk about it in like different sections. Like, we're gonna share like from ages like 1 to like 10 in elementary school.
Yeah. We're not gonna talk about like the day we came out of the womb, because I mean that's like not.
Yeah, but like we're gonna go back and forth through different sections of our testimony, so it's not just like me talking for 15 minutes and Brenna talking for 15 minutes. Like,
because I'm gonna lose.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pay attention to her if she starts talking for 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we're gonna break it up into chunks. So when I was little, I grew up in a Christian home. With a Christian family, always went to church growing up, went to Sunday school. And I feel like it's a very normal thing for little kids, that I lived off of my parents' faith. I accepted Christ into my heart when I was 4, actually on Valentine's Day. But like, obviously as a 4-year-old, like, I didn't know all that was going to come with a relationship with Christ, and so that's had to be something that like I've revisited and decided every day that I'm going to follow Jesus and I'm going to follow Christ. But my faith was mostly my parents' faith that I was living off of up until I was around, I want to say like 7 or 8. So, my dad had struggled with alcohol as I grew up, and in my mind, like, it didn't affect me at all. Like, he was just my dad. Like, there wasn't anything like he didn't hurt me or my mom or anything. But my parents did. Okay, so they never fought in front of me or my sister. And I don't remember them fighting much, but I remember my room is directly below theirs, and there was like a ceiling vent that at night I could hear them fighting and arguing in their room, which did it hurt, and it was sad that I was like, okay, why are my parents fighting? Because as a little kid, obviously you don't want either of your parents to fight. But I remember one night we were sitting, me and my mom and my sister were sitting at the dinner table. My sister was pretty young because she's like 4.5 years younger than me. So if I was 7 or 8, she was 3 or 4. So we were all sitting at the dinner table, and I don't remember if my mom texted or called my dad. And this is obviously such a long time ago, so I don't remember everything minute for minute. Anyway, and she was like, "Hey, like, are you coming home for dinner?" And my dad was like, "No, I'm just gonna stay at my friend's house." And this had been like, I want to say like a week or two of him like not being at dinner because he was at friends' houses or out doing stuff and drinking. And I remember that specific night, like, my mom was like physically watching her break and be upset. And I remember running to my room and shutting my door, and I remember crying into my horse beanbag in my room. And because I was so upset that my dad had made my mom so upset. And I remember coming down, and I was like, okay, like, I'm gonna go find my mom. And I remember she was sitting out on their front porch steps with her head in her hands. And I don't remember specifically her crying in the moment. I feel like there might have been like tears in her eyes, or she like sounded upset or shaky. We sat there and talked. And so I was kind of like confused on like what was happening, because why did dad not come home from supper upset my mom so much? And I remember her talking to me about like how dad was an alcoholic, which meant he struggled with too much alcohol, and alcohol does bad things to your brain. And I remember him coming home, and I remember running in and hugging him because that night he decided that he was done drinking. And I didn't really know what that meant in the moment because my dad had always been my dad and he'd always been that way. Um, but that night he went to bed, and I remember me and my mom went through our refrigerator and dumped out all of his beer and alcohol and whatever he had. Um, and yeah, that's that's kind of when I decided, like, after hearing like my parents, how they would fight and how they didn't get along and the hurt in them, that's kind of when I was like, I kind of want to have a faith of my own, so that when my parents are struggling and I can't rely on their faith, I still have God.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was pretty much my childhood.
Yeah, so me and Maddie's like this part right here is very similar to each other, but we didn't know about this until like we just really started talking about it. But
Like 5 minutes ago.
yeah, real. Um, so when I was growing up, I was like obviously I grew up into a Christian household, and I've been Methodist since, like, because they are all about like infant baptisms and stuff like that. So I was baptized immediately, and so I up until like I didn't really when I was little I didn't really have a care in the world. I kind of just like walked around like oh look at the sky like rainbows and but I was also a very anxious little girl, and so when I used to cry about everything, I still do, but I remember that like sometimes I remember my parents kind of like bickering a little bit, but never like bad, because they never did it in front of us. But then I remember one time, um, my dad called me and my sister into the uh, room upstairs, and he was like, "Hey, I need to talk to you," and I was like, what did I do?" Because he used to get very angry, and I was afraid. And he was like, "I need you both to come in here. I need to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I'm in trouble, and I never got in trouble. There was one time that I got in trouble in elementary school, and that has messed me up to this day. I'm also really bad at telling stories. um, but so he called us into the room and was like, "I need to talk to you." And then so I kind of just sat there, and he was like, "So I'm not drinking anymore." And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." Like I was like, "Good for you, I guess," because I didn't know what to think. And this was like I was like 7, 8, or 9, because my sister's 5 years older than me, and she 4.5. So she knew more about it than I did, but I was like, okay, like I don't really know what you're trying to tell me. And but that I didn't realize until like I was 11 or 12 that like that was actually like not okay, and that like he was very like emotionally absent and was not there for us. But he's gotten a lot better. We love Jer Bear. But yeah, so yeah, I was, and I didn't really like, I kind of just didn't really think about God that often. And I went to church, but I just knew stories that I mean, growing up, I like everybody around me always knew like the story of like Noah's Ark and stuff like that. And I always felt like, why, like, I don't know about that. Like, what is that? And I went to church, I just didn't like, I paid attention, but I also didn't pay attention because I diagnosed ADHD. But I just like I didn't know. And some of these stories, like at youth group, I'll hear, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I know that one." I'm like, "What? What story is that?" Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, I actually also relate to that. Like growing up, people would always like, "Oh yeah," and like that relates to this verse and this passage, and I'm like,
yeah,
"What?"
yeah,
Like I would read my Bible and
yeah.
I do Bible studies and like I'd go to church, but for some reason like I couldn't just like when Mark chapter 3 it said like
No, and I aspire to be like that because
yeah
that's like people are like, "Oh, like this verse in the Bible says this," and I'm like, "What? What?" Like, oh, like I know
yeah.
John 3:16.
And I also feel like part of me is probably just overthinking it because I'm also like a chronic overthinker, and so it's probably actually just not that bad in real life. Like I probably do know verses. I'm just
we
like
just are making it.
Like
yeah.
I just panic.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so moving on to like my middle school age. So 6th grade was really rough for me. That was the COVID year. Actually, for me it was.
That was my.
No, it wasn't.
That was the beginning.
That was your cohort year.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm right. Anyway,
Ow.
that was the year like we weren't in school because of COVID. And actually, the beginning of 6th grade was fine, but e-learning was terrible for me. I didn't do anything, and I felt very, very alone and very, very isolated. Which is when I first started getting like, when I first started feeling very alone and just like, I don't want to say depressed because I don't know that I actually was depressed. I actually probably was, but just very, very down with myself, and just very, very alone. And I feel like that's a pretty shared experience throughout COVID because everyone truly was alone.
I was living my life. I love being alone.
But then it was 7th grade. 7th grade was really, really bad for me. Like, probably one of the darkest points of my life. Like, very, very depressed, very anxious. And actually, I haven't told my parents this, so surprise, mom, surprise, dad. In 7th grade, I dated a lot of, well, dated a lot of people. We didn't like go out or talk. We didn't even talk. We just, anyway. Because I kept like seeking the fulfillment of like the fulfillment only God can give me with all of these guys. Like I had a God-sized hole in my heart, and so I tried to squeeze as many guys into it to make me feel better. Because since I was in such a dark point, I thought that like I could figure it out on my own and that I didn't need God's help because I'm a big girl. I'm a middle schooler. Like
She got it.
I got it. I got it under control. Which obviously I did not. And it was so terrible. And yeah, it was really bad. And like looking at me, you wouldn't tell that I'd ever walked inside a church building once in my life. And that was like really hard for me to look back on. Like my 8th grade and freshman year, it's like wow, like I was a terrible person. Like I can't believe people still even talk to me. And I was in like a very, not the people in the friend group were bad because they're sweet people, but the friend group itself was very, very toxic and very, very hurtful. And eventually in 8th grade, I was still with the same friends, but our interaction was like more spread out since we weren't all in the same cohort group all the time. And eventually I did drift from some of those friends that I had bad relationships with. And I started to be friends with like more of my childhood friends. My goodness. Sorry, I keep hiccuping. Like I became really close friends with my childhood best friend from like preschool. But then that ended up that friendship ended up hurting me in the future. But I got to know more people, know more girls, and I kind of started finding myself again and finding my way back to God and realizing that He's the only person that could satisfy me and fulfill me, and that all these guys were doing nothing but lead me farther and farther from God. Because obviously, I wasn't choosing high quality guys. Like I wasn't choosing guys that were pursuing God actively, and not saying that those guys were bad people. They just weren't guys that were actively following Christ in the way that you should.
So when I was in 6th grade, I was virtual, so I didn't have a relationship. Your 7th grade year, my 6th grade year.
Virtual?
Yeah, I was an online kid. Yeah, well, it was. I didn't talk to anyone, except for this one girl, James Stonebreaker, shout out. But we were the only, like, she was the only girl that I really talked to that year. But that was the first year that I was on a competition team too. But I did not talk to anyone my sixth and seventh grade at dance. Like I did not talk to anyone. Like you would have not known that I existed. Like I was literally just a body walking around because we had to wear masks. I had the mask on the whole time, and I wore the same outfit every week. Yeah, just ask Melissa Fudge. She was my 8th grade year. I said one word, and she was like, "That's what you sound like," and I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
But then, So my grandma, she has ever since I was like like 2 or 3. She has had stage 4 breast cancer. Well, she had stage 4 breast cancer, but she passed away. I think it was my 8th grade year. Yeah, passed away 8th grade, Christmas break. And she was like my best friend growing up. But when I didn't really understand that she had cancer until I was like 12. And then by then it was like really bad. Like seeing her like deteriorate just like in front of our eyes was like really bad for me. And that is part of the reason why I have so much anxiety today is because I like
It just started flashing
oh
red
heck
and
no.
green. Anyway, sorry.
And so
Sorry, mic difficulties.
And so she didn't like I didn't talk to her for a very long time because she obviously she couldn't speak. I didn't go down to my grandparents' house because they live right there. They live on the same property as us. But I was what was I saying?
It was very bad for you, like watching her deteriorate in front of your eyes.
That is why I have so much such bad. I have really bad anxiety in general, but I have such bad health anxiety. Like if I get a headache, I think I'm like dying. Like I have an hour left, and it's not good. But it was that's the reason why I do because I watch her deteriorate in front of right in front of me. But so then that was my 8th grade year, and during that time like people were like they came up to me and they were like, your grandma is such an amazing like she was an amazing woman, like everybody loved her and she loved Jesus and like she is where she wanted to be. And I was kind of just like, okay, like that's cool. But like now that I like realize what that was like, I aspire to be like her faith because that was like she had amazing faith.
Yeah. Okay, so I completely forgot to mention both of my great grandparents passed away during my middle school years, and they were very, very impactful in my life. My great grandpa, his name was Jim Martin. Why did I say Martin like that? Sorry, Jim Martin, and he was, I believe he was one of the pastors at First Church, for a while, and I think. I don't know. I didn't go to that church when I was younger. And he was just a very, very influential person and very, very not powerful, but like influential and just like lots of people loved him and he was very on fire for the Lord. And my Nana, okay, they're my Nana and Papa, so I'm saying Nana and Papa, that's why. I remember lots of people would talk after she passed away that she was like the definition of like the Proverbs 31 woman. And was just such a great wife and Christ follower that I've always like looked up to her in that aspect. And so basically the story of that is one day my grandma and grandpa were at my Nana and Pop-Up's house and they were having dinner, and out of nowhere my Nana had a stroke and she fell and hit her head, and they took her to the hospital and she ended up having a brain bleed that just didn't stop. And so she was put in a nursing home, which was really hard on both my Nana and my Pop because he obviously wasn't there with her, but he'd go and visit her every single day. And so as we watched her deteriorate, we kind of like had prepared ourselves for like her passing away because like we knew that like she'd be better off in heaven because her physical body was in pain and wasn't healthy. But then one day I remember my family was sitting in my living room. I believe this was 2020. Sitting in my living room, and we were watching The Lion King. We just started the live action Lion King because it had just came out. And my mom got a call. I remember her being on the phone and then just breaking down into tears. And we were all like, just happened. And she called and said that my pop had had a heart attack and passed away. And that was a complete shock to all of us because we're like, like we hadn't prepared for his death because he was relatively healthy for his age. And so that like turned my world upside down. And what broke my heart was my Nana would call him all the time, and he was supposed to come visit. And she was calling him and he wouldn't answer, and my grandma walked in to her room in the nursing home, and the first thing she said was, "He's dead, isn't he?" Which broke my heart hearing about that, because I cry. We're gonna have to cut this out of Yeah, so that broke my heart hearing about that because she was just like, she loved her husband so much. And like, even as much as she loved him, she loved the Lord so much more. But all of us at that point were kind of like, okay, so she's probably like, we don't know how long she's gonna last without Pop because, like, he's her everything. Or like, she probably won't even make it a year after his death. And it's so funny and kind of ironic. She made it. She died the day after the year anniversary of his death. Which, yeah, was. Anyway, so that was that. We also might have to keep switching mics because mine kept flashing red because it was dying. So
Just died.
that one also just died. So yeah. Is it my turn again? I think it is. Okay. Moving on to high school. So if you remember my middle school, I know that was a second ago because we've talked about a lot of other things. But I had put my worth into guys and tried to fill the hole in my heart from the me not following God with a whole bunch of guys. And so my freshman year, me and my friend at the time decided that we weren't gonna date anyone like our entire senior year. Well, until our senior year, like till we graduated. Like we're gonna focus on high school and focus on having fun, and we're not gonna date anyone. Which I think we both kind of knew at the time that was probably not the most achievable goal. But, you know, shoot for the moon, you land among the stars. Anyway. And so, like, I wasn't looking for any guys. Like, I was done. I was past that. My friend, she wasn't a Christian at all. And my friend at the time, she wasn't a believer at all. I tried to lead her to Christ, like, ever since preschool, and she just wasn't interested. So she was doing her own thing. But while I wasn't focusing on guys, I made it a priority for me to focus on God and fix my relationship with Christ that I'd had. And I was doing great, like, on such a, like, high point in my faith walk. Like I said, wasn't looking for any guys, wasn't like that's not what was on my brain, not on my heart. Because I knew that like if I was following God and pursuing God every day, then I'd find a guy in his time. Sorry. Goodness. Find a guy in the Lord's timing. And then there was this one boy who came and sat at our lunch table. And at first I thought he was really weird. And I was like, okay, the heck? Like, what? You? Anyway, because he came and talked to one of the guys that already sat at our lunch table because they were friends. So we'd come over almost every day. And, like, he was fine. He was cool. I'd recognized him from youth group, and I knew who he was because he was dating a girl that I knew in middle school. And so I'd heard the name. I knew who he was. And like I'd seen him at youth group, and I was like, oh, that's her boyfriend. Anyway, but I knew who he was. And there was one day I went out in the like commons of Eagle Tech, to work on my math assignment, and I was sitting outside of the chemistry lab, and he was in chemistry, and this was before the phone ban, so. I looked in at one point just like because I didn't want to do my math, so I was just like looking around, and I made eye contact with him, and I looked on my phone, and I get a DM from him that's like, "Stop stalking me, you freak," or something like that, and I was like, "What? I'm not stalking you." Anyway, and then we just started talking, and like I wasn't even looking for anything with him at that point. Like I was still just like, "We're friends, yay!" Anyway, but eventually, like I was praying about it, and I was like, okay, so I kind of feel like maybe I'm starting to like him, but I really wanted to focus on school and not on guys. So like, no. And then anyway, I continued praying about it, and then he asked me out, and I was like, and we're still dating to this day. So shout out to Ben. Um, and like throughout that relationship, like we've both pursued God together, and it's been great. Um, but throughout that, I've also gone through lots of seasons of loneliness in high school. I mean, like I've always had Ben, my boyfriend. He's always been there. But like friendship wise, I've always felt very, very lonely. My freshman year, the friend group that I had split apart. Well, not the whole friend group, but like bits and pieces split from each other. Anyway. And I sat at a table that I didn't feel very loved or welcomed by everyone at, which was very hard for me. Um, because like I didn't know what I had done to not like get love from these people. Um, which was very, very hard. And I continued to sit with them until my sophomore year, until it was past the point of like it was too painful to sit there because I felt so very unloved and so very unwelcomed. I went and ended up sitting alone. And that was very, very hard for me, sitting in a lunchroom full of people all by myself. Because obviously then everyone's looking at me like, oh, she's sitting alone. And I felt very, very judged and just so very alone, and it was so hard. Um, but eventually I worked up the courage to ask, well, first I asked Brenna if I could sit with her when I first met her, and she was at a table that also wasn't the greatest environment for her. So then I ended up sitting with some people in my grade, and they were great. But then Brenna started sitting at a different table, and I was like, "Oh, hey girl, can I sit with you?" So I did, and that group of girls was so so amazing, and they made me feel so loved, even though like half of them didn't know me well, and they were all they were all freshmen. Ew.
So at that that first table that she was talking about, I also did not feel very welcomed at that table. So I did not want to invite someone else because there was also someone already had to pull up a chair. That would not have been a good situation. Anyways, at the new table, we love Maddie. We miss her. We miss her every day.
Anyway, so I was sitting with them, and it was so great, and I loved it so much, and I loved those girls so much. Um, and that was just like a great way to end my sophomore year because I felt so loved and I felt so welcome, which is something I had missed for so long. And it led me through multiple seasons of depression. But then throughout the summer, I started to notice like me and Brenna got really, really close. And like when I introduced her to some of my like past friends that like maybe I wasn't the closest with, but like we were still friends. Um, it felt like they wanted to hang out with her way more than they wanted to hang out with me. Not that like I'm not mad at Brenna. I'm not blaming Brenna for this. It's not her fault. Um, but it just made me like feel like I wasn't enough for any of them, and that like I wasn't deserving of their love. Um, which was really, really, really hard because I was like, me and Brenna are like literally the exact same person. Like we're so alike. So like, how come you like her and not me? And it was really, really hard, and it still is hard because I still am like dealing with that of like I don't understand what I'm doing that's not enough for these people to love me. Even though I don't know that's necessarily something I'm doing or not doing. Um, but yeah. So that was really, really hard. But this year, I've continued to be really, really close with Brenna, and I'm close with Keely. And even though like I'm not as close with like some of my old friends now, like we're still like on very, very good terms. I feel like I'm not friends with some of the people I used to be super close with, or like not super close with some of the people I used to be super close with. I'm still like been able to maintain those friendships. And this year it's been pretty good. I did I sat at a lunch table this year that I just nothing's wrong with any of the people that sit at the lunch table. But it just wasn't like a godly environment for me to sit in. And I think like me and Ben both felt very much the same way of like this is just not a godly environment. Like we love all these people, but it's just not it's not like bringing us joy and like satisfaction to sit here. Like we're leaving here feeling like I don't know, just kind of empty. Um because some people at the table like aren't accepting to Christ. And so me and Ben like reached out to one of Ben's good friends, and so Gavin and Allie, and we asked them if they'd want to sit there, and then we reached out to Daniel and Allison, um, and so we now sit at that lunch table, and it's much more like I feel more refreshed afterwards, and not drained from trying to like navigate like, ooh, I don't know if I should be here in this conversation since I claimed Christ, and this is not a godly conversation, which is something I've had to battle with because like obviously like not everyone's a Christian and we can't hold non-Christians to a Christian standard of living, but you also don't want to just completely abandon them. And so it's like a hard balance of like I love these people and like being there for them and being a godly influence in their life, but also like they're kind of tearing me down and like draining me. And so then I'm not able to be the person who I want to be. So yeah, we're back. So first both of our mics died. Then we took a break and plugged them in and ate dinner.
Yeah.
Came back ready to record, and then our receiver died. So plugged that back in. But we're ready now.
Okay. So freshman year, everything was off to a good start. I had a good group of friends, and I was happy with the way things were going. I was on a new dance team, and I was getting close with those girls. And so then I had never been in a relationship before. I've had many crushes, and I got into this relationship in September, and we were together until January. And we did a bunch of things together, but I was very attached to that person, and I didn't realize that things that were going on in my relationship, and I didn't realize until like 2 months after we broke up. So there was things that happened, and so when we broke up, it was a very bad breakup. The breakup lasted like 3 months, and it also just being in high school and everybody drawing that out definitely doesn't help either. But I was in no, hold on. I was
You're good.
So in like after there were a bunch of rumors that were spread about just like what had happened and the two of us together, and it was like I was at rock bottom, and I was like, there is nothing that is going to get me out of this. And during this time, the only thing that I looked for was validation from boys. That was all I seeked, and that was the only thing that I thought was going to be able to help me. And but then so then I got into this intense friendship with a guy, and this boy made me feel, it felt like he was the first boy that made me feel like I actually belonged in this world, because all throughout elementary school and all throughout middle school, I had never had any guy friends, anything like that, because they were all like, she's like she's like the teacher's pet, and they all hated me. And so I was like, so after I got a boyfriend, I was like, oh, so like guys actually do like me. And then I got into this friendship with this guy, and he was the first boy to make me feel like I belonged.
Mhm.
And so we were talking for a while, and then in a couple months, something else happened, and I was not in a good spot again, and my heart was broken, and the only thing that I didn't know how to get out of it, because I was like, so nobody cares for me anymore, and I'm stuck like this forever.
Mhm.
But during this time was when me and Maddie started to get close, because we were in Unified Track together, and it was so nice to, like, because we started getting close in advisory because she had adopted me, and I would walk into advisory crying every day, and she would just be there to give me a hug,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is that's really what you need.
Yeah, like I didn't, because like we weren't super close at the time, and so I didn't know like what to say to her because I didn't know her well. But I just listened and I gave her a hug, and now she loves me. So
It works. But it really just, it was so nice just to have somebody there to listen. And me and Maddie, I mean, we're like just like from filming today, we found out things that were like more similar than we thought. And so then over the summer, I was very upset with this guy, and I could not get him out of my head. And so Maddie went on a mission trip, and we kind of snapped back and forth and talked that week. And then I was at a different camp that week. I think it was that same week. And no, it was a week before that. It was. So Maddie was on a mission trip, and we were kind of talking back and forth, and we hung out one night, and we went to Old Settlers, and this boy came along with us. And during this, that was the only thing that was on my mind, and the only thing I was paying attention to was his validation.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the next week, I met one of my best friends, and at a camp that I went to, and I was kind of like a counselor that week. And I got really close with those girls, and that was just a really like eye-opening experience. And that was kind of like one of my turning points for the Lord. And I was like, he is amazing. Like the things that, like, it was amazing to see him work through the counselors and work through the kids, and it brought me closer to him. And so then the next week, I went to Bear Lake Camp with Maddie, and I was very distracted that week by boys, and I was not paying attention to the Lord like I should have been. I still was. I mean, like, I was not looking for him in the things that I should have been looking for. Like, I was looking for, like, during worship, I was looking at something completely different. Like, I was not looking for the Lord. I was not praising him. My mind was on boys.
You're more focused on a worldly relationship than the relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. And so then things kind of happened that week, and it was after that week, my heart was just like shattered. Like, I was so tired of everything, and I didn't know what to do, and I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, I felt so unlovable, and I texted Maddie, and I was like, why is this happening to me? And but also that week, I kind of felt bad because the only thing that was on my mind was boys, and I was not thinking about the Lord, and I brought other people down by doing that, because that was the only thing I would talk about. So I still think about that, and I still feel bad about that, and like, I feel like that's the only thing that I talk about. But then I had a couple weeks away from people, and it was nice to just kind of think through and process what happened. And then I kind of started talking to someone else, and that relationship was amazing. There was nothing bad about that, and he did bring me closer to the Lord. He had invited me to a youth pool party, and I didn't. And when I was in elementary school, I went to First Church, and then I didn't really start going until, and I didn't like start going to their youth group until like this year. So, but so I went to the pool party, and because I was invited, and then I started going to the youth group, and I was very focused on other things that I should not have been focused on. Like, I was so focused on boys over and over again, and it was the same one over and over again. And I started going to youth group just to see him, because another thing that I struggle with is being petty, and I do not like that I do that, and that's definitely something that I'm trying to work on. But I was so petty about it, and I would go just to see him and like maybe try and talk to him. But and then it ended up in me getting my heart broken again, because then we tried to work things out, which didn't work, but it gave me some sliver of hope, because I didn't tell anyone this, but I was like, I still I still want this relationship.
You didn't tell anyone, but I knew.
I did, yeah, exactly.
So did your mother.
I did. Exactly. I did not tell anyone, because I was like, I'm scared to tell Maddie, because she's gonna be so mad at me.
Yeah.
And then she knew anyways, but neither of us said anything, because we were all like, okay, like we all know what I'm thinking. But and that was like, I seeked so much validation from boys, and it was the only thing I was looking for, and the only thing that I thought that I could get love for. And my heart got broken again, and I was like, why am I so unlovable? Like, I feel like this should not be happening to me. But I've kind of learned that now, like, since I've thought about it, I have started going to youth group for the right reasons, and I love those girls in my small group. And since getting my heart broken many times, I have realized that the only one that I can truly have that fulfillment in is through God, because he's the only one that is going to fill that void and that hole in my heart. And I cannot get that from any guy, because like over the summer I'd be praying and I'm like, God, please just like give me a sign, like if he likes me, or if you want me to put my energy into him, like have him text me something. And it was not the right things that I should have been asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And he did those things, but I think that was just God trying to tell me, you are not going to get any. Like, he was letting me get my heart broken so many times, because that was the only way that I was going to be able to realize that the only person I can get my fulfillment in is from him.
Yeah, and no matter how great the guy is, if you don't put God in front of him, it does not matter, because it won't work out ever. Yeah.
So now I am trying to work on grudges and being petty and that kind of stuff, but I have started going to youth group for the right reasons, and I have, throughout all of this, I've found my people and the people that I love and who love me.
Yeah. So that's us.
Yeah.
So if any of that, like, if you guys have been struggling with any of that, we'd love to talk to you. Please reach out. If it was something like Brenna said that you like thought stuck out, don't be afraid to just message her and not both of us. Or if it was something that I said that stuck out, don't be afraid to message me and not both of us.
But if you don't want to message like both of us, then that's okay too. We're not going to be offended.
Yeah, if you don't want to message us at all, that's fine.
Yeah.
We just want to help you through what you're going through if you need someone to walk beside you.
Yeah.
And yeah, Brenna has we have a theme verse
for
our podcast.
So if you know, the name is Freedom from Flesh. 2 Corinthians 3:17, and it says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." So when we have the Lord, and with the Lord in our hearts, we are free.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode. See you in the next one. We love you all. Please reach out. Have a great week.